Welcome back. Welcome back to Living in Mexico. I'm Ana Maria Salazar. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. It's that time of the year where all of us, yeah, analysts, are trying to, yeah, those of us who do, these news programs are trying to figure out what does this year look like, 2025. And I say this because, there is a divergence in terms of where Mexico economy is going, what are, what is going to be the impact of some of the first decisions that are going to be made by Donald Trump once he's sworn in January 20th. I mean, there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of nervousness about not only Donald Trump, but the impact this could have on the U.S. economy and then could have on the Mexican economy. I mean, there's just all these, there's just this a lot of I don't know. I don't even know how to describe this environment, which it's hard to make decisions. And I'm sure the business community is struggling with that. And of course, the Mexican government's trying to figure out how to deal with some of these threats that have been launched by Donald Trump against Mexico, basically saying that they're going to dramatically increase tariffs. So it's hard. At least I'm having a lot of trouble trying to look at Mexico's future, at least, in trying to see what the path the Mexican government's going to take. That's why I really, really, really appreciate today's guest. This is not the first time he joins us, but we haven't had the opportunity to speak to him for a while. Jorge Suarez Velez. He is a very well-known economist. I'm sure many of you have seen him on TV. You've heard him on radio. You've read his column in Reforma. It's a very popular column in the newspaper Reforma. Jorge, welcome to the show. You and I had the opportunity to participate in a forum at ITAM University this week, and it was. I mean, you were one of the panelists, and I was just somewhat taken aback by how there is some of the economists who were present seem to be very optimistic in terms of what's going to happen with the U.S. economy, not to pay too much attention to the threats by Donald Trump, make sure Mexico has a good negotiation strategy. And then there's other economists, and I think you were one of them. You're not that optimistic, or I guess the word should be you're concerned. So let's talk about what are your main concerns in terms of what's going to happen with the Mexican economy in the next couple of weeks and months?
Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me. Always a pleasure to talk with you. Let me start from the U.S. because I think that probably makes the issues in Mexico a little clearer. Mm-hmm. My concern with the United States is not I would say a very fundamental one. What do I mean by this? I think the United States economy is just incredible. I think it's shown incredible resilience. I think that many of us were doubtful of the possibility of a soft landing, which is what is being achieved. I think that we cannot forget that the U.S. is increasing productivity in ways that are making this economy extraordinarily exciting. And it is still the epicenter of what I would consider the most consequential industrial or technological revolution probably in the history of mankind. But having said that, I think that the one thing the United States has not done is pay for the pandemic, as has happened with most of the industrialized countries in the world. So the average debt that we see in the world is of around 120% of GDP. Last week there was an announcement that the global debt, surpassed for the first time ever $100 trillion. That's around 100% of GDP. So I think that what I'm having trouble understanding is how do we expect for a country that has this level of debt, that has a tax deficit of about 6.5 points of GDP, how do we expect it to fund these with declining interest rates? I really don't see how. So I think one of my main concerns is that rates are not going to come down, at least not by far, not in the way that markets have forecasted. And I think that an issue there as well is that financial markets are priced for perfection. I don't think we're in a bubble. I think that the Magnificent Seven and other very relevant corporations have had very good performance. but I think it's a 23 times earnings. The market is priced for perfection, and I think that what we could see is probably a year where markets are going to be much less generous than they were in the last 2 years. Probably some impact on consumption, and yes, we do have the threat of tariffs by Trump, which could have an impact on consumer spending in the United States. So, how does that affect Mexico? I think that affects Mexico in many ways. I think on one hand, you might have even in the case of moderate increases of tariffs or retaliation, I would say, against Mexican imports and things like this, you would have less revenue from exports in Mexico, which is very relevant. The other thing that the other threat of Donald Trump is massive deportations, which again could create a lot of issues for the Mexican economy, because unlike the American economy that has shown incredible growth and productivity, the Mexican economy has not at all grown in terms of productivity, and salaries have increased quite a bit because of legal mandates. So what could happen if you all of a sudden have this massive inflow of workers coming into Mexico, et cetera, could be not very easy to digest for the Mexican economy. The other big issue that we have is that probably in the last quarter of last year, the Mexican economy was already flat in the best case scenario. The first quarter of this year, we're expecting it to actually show some negative growth. So Mexico could already be in a technical recession. As you saw in the seminar today, relevant economists are saying growth this year could be forecasted at around 0.8%. Well, growth in the United States is forecasted close to 2.5%, being a much larger economy. So this is showing a lot of structural issues in Mexico. Mexico has zero fiscal leeway because it's spending too much, and tax revenues are stagnant. Entitlements are extraordinarily expensive. Pemex is bankrupt. Pemex has massive debt with suppliers that is somewhere, depending on who you listen to, between 10 and $20 billion. It has over $100 billion worth of debt. Is the most indebted energy company in the world. So Mexico is facing real challenges, and the Mexican government does not seem to be aware of how badly it needs private investment in order to navigate this very, very cumbersome environment.
You know, Jorge, I remember throughout the years when I speak to and I have the opportunity to converse and interview economists like you, there was always kind of this theory that if the U.S. economy grew, automatically the Mexican economy would grow with the United States. I mean, there was kind of that there's this link, that there's this hook of the Mexican economy that would grab on to any growth that would take place in the United States. And it sounds like that equation, that theory, it doesn't apply anymore. Am I wrong?
You're not wrong, and I think that shows some major shortcomings, structural shortcomings in Mexico that have to do also with very bad public investing. I think that Mexico has not invested in real infrastructure. Public spending has been truly mistaken. The allocation has been dreadful, to say the least. So Mexico's left without, as you know, the Mexico City airport was canceled, which was infrastructure that was badly needed, particularly when supply chains have shortened so much, and where air transportation for cargo has become so important. You go to Mexican highways and you see potholes everywhere, because basically this government has decided that it privileges handouts instead of infrastructure investing. And instead of allowing then private companies to invest, the reforms that have been pushed by the government have really killed private investing. And even in sectors like energy, where there's a lot of appetite for investing, when the government says that it has to own 54% of any project, and when it itself does not have the money to invest in these projects, then it's like a straitjacket for the private companies that would like to invest much more. And at the same time, we're seeing the rule of law being badly hindered. We're seeing criminal gangs growing in influence and in control of some regions of the country, which makes doing business there much harder. So it's I think that a lot of the problems that Mexico is suffering are not imported because of Trump or because of whatever international environment, but they're basically self-inflicted.
The other discussion that came up, I had the opportunity to converse with former Secretary of Finance Guillermo Ortiz, and I was kind of struck, and it somewhat kind of underlines what you were just saying, is this, there seems to be kind of like this schizophrenia in the policies that are being pushed by the Mexican government. On the one hand, they want investment to come to Mexico. They claim that they're calling on investors to come to Mexico, but on the other hand, there is these reforms that clearly are going to create a series of problems for investors. They're going to be nervous if you don't know if the rule of law exists anymore in Mexico, or the security issue, as you mentioned. So there's kind of this clash of policies that eventually, and there was a lot of talk during this forum about the need for a tax reform, that it would only be through a tax reform that Mexico would be able to finance all these social programs, but also other needs in order to promote foreign investment. And you made an extraordinary comment. You are totally against any tax reforms in Mexico. Could you explain to our audience why?
Let me shock you a little bit more. I hate taxes.
Okay.
I hate paying taxes. And I think that what seems to be very unfair is that we're expected to just shut up, pay the tax, and not question how money is being spent.
Right.
I would say the same comment in the United States as in Mexico. As you know, I live in New York, and when I see the level of waste in public spending, it really makes me very, very mad. In the case of Mexico, I think in many ways it's even worse because, as I was saying, this government has just decided to give tons of handouts to buy political favor with the voters, but it is not a government that is concerned about how do you become more competitive, how do you build infrastructure to increase productivity, how do you invest in public education so that people can actually aspire to better their economic situations. When we see public hospitals being, I mean, the level of service that we see in public hospitals today is worse than anything we saw in the last 50 years in Mexico. So if they tell me, well, you need a tax reform so that the government is going to have more money, what I wonder is, why would we give more money to this government that every single investment that they have done has been extraordinarily stupid? And I mean, they invest money as if they were not in 2025, but in 1925. They love to create passenger trains. They love refineries. I mean, the administration Lopez Obrador kept talking about sovereignty, about energy sovereignty, which for him was to refine our own gasoline. I mean, the market of gasoline in the world is one of the most efficient ones. You don't need to produce it yourself. You will always find suppliers. But then we rely on the United States for about 80 or 90% of the gas that we consume. And that, that comes through pipelines, that, we don't want to exploit our own gas fields. And Mexico has banned any kind of fracking. So it's when I used to be an analyst in an international bank many years ago, and I remember that always funds would tell me, "Oh, Mexico should learn from Brazil that its tax collection relative to GDP is almost twice the one of Mexico's." And what I would think is, I would rather be in Mexico's position than Brazil's position. Brazil already raises about 30-something% of GDP of tax collection, and they waste it like drunk sailors. And they have created all these entitlements. They have created all these programs that lead to nothing. They have lousy infrastructure. They don't have a good public education system. They don't have good public health. Why should we aspire to that? I think that we need to demand from governments that they're fully accountable for what they decide to do with our money. And I think
Right.
that the Mexican government is miles away from any kind of accountability. And not only
Right.
that, but they've killed many of the entities that were our checks and balances in order to ensure that the government is responsible. So yeah, of course, there should be no
Right.
tax reform until they get their act together.
You know, and during the conference, you said, why would we give them more money to construct more refineries, more those bocas? They would make 3 bocas, 4 bocas. I mean, actually, that was kind of very funny moment during a very, very serious discussion. Jorge, it's always great to have you on the show. Promise me you'll come back soon. I always enjoy talking
Whenever
to
you
you.
invite me, I'll be here.
Thank you, Jorge
My
Suarez.
pleasure.
Thank you, Jorge Suarez Velez, very well-known economist. Make sure you read his column in newspaper Reforma. We're going to go to commercial break. I'm Ana Maria Salazar, and you're listening and watching Living in Mexico. Please don't go away. I'll be right back.
Listo.
Te lo agradezco. Un fuerte abrazo. Nos vemos
Muchísimos
pronto.
saludos y buen fin de semana.
Gracias.
Chao.